I think every combat armed soldier that's been on tour and in a combat zone suffers from some degree of PTSD. If they've had critical incidences while they were overseas, then that PTSD could be even more severe. But I think the foundation for PTSD actually comes in a lot of ways from the training that they give us. It's all about violence, speed and aggression, being able to flip that switch to insane violence immediately upon a threat. And that type of training and driving that home and driving that threat home kind of puts you in a certain mindset, a do or die, life or death type of mindset. And then when you go overseas and you're put into that intense environment, you know, you're just kind of programmed, I think, when you come back to suffer from PTSD symptoms. You know, and I think that while you're overseas, if you have a critical incident or something happens while you're there, you're programmed to be susceptible to these symptoms. When I returned from Afghanistan, the symptoms I started noticing right away was hypervigilance. I was having trouble getting to sleep at night, and my level of anxiety, anger, and frustration with kind of everything throughout my day was at a very, very high level. My wife was the first who said, "Rather, you've got PTSD." She was the first to notice it. Once she kind of pointed it out to me, I recognized it as well, but I was afraid to go see the military physicians to get a PTSD diagnosis because that basically put you on the injured list. It meant that your career was essentially over, that you weren't going to be selected for any courses or any additional tours, and I was afraid of having that PTSD stigma associated with me. And I also knew that if I got a diagnosis, I would be expected to take pharmaceuticals.
When we're seeing veterans in the clinic, the vast majority have been to numerous specialists. So usually they've already seen a psychiatrist, they may have been to a pain clinic, they've been on at least 4, 5, 6, and sometimes I've seen as high as 10 to 12 different pharmaceuticals. From the psychiatric standpoint, we usually try antidepressants, even sometimes antipsychotics or sleeping pills because insomnia is such a terrible symptom that vets experience. When it comes to chronic pain, we see them on a host of different neurological medications like Cymbalta or Tramadol or opioids like oxycodone or Percocets. And despite all of those pharmaceuticals, the vast majority of them still feel like they're not getting the relief that they're looking for, or they're not tolerating the side effects of the pharmaceuticals as well as they'd like. Sometimes they are a little bit better on them, but you know, they complain about, you know, being in a zombie state, or you know, just not themselves, or lacking interest in everyday activities, and so something's off still, and so they're still looking for something to help manage their symptoms.
Having seen other guys use pharmaceuticals and some of the effects that they've had, and just I was very adverse to that idea. So I actually, due to the fact that I had a relationship with cannabis when I was in high school, kind of preferred it over drinking and knew the effects of it. Instead of seeking a diagnosis in pharmaceuticals, I actually picked up some cannabis and I began using cannabis in the evenings.
And so with vets, a lot of them have significant insomnia where they experience recurrence of dreams or traumas at night, and that keeps them awake all night. And if that's what you're experiencing, your brain cannot heal. And so what we usually give vets who failed other therapies is we'll usually give them a little bit of cannabis oil at night. Usually it has some CBD and some THC in it, or actually just a pure THC. Usually very small, modest doses, usually between 2 to 10 milligrams. And what the vast majority will come back and say is, I feel like I'm sleeping better, my dreams are actually substantially less. And then they wake up the next day and they feel substantially less anxious.
I just knew cannabis was probably better for me than pharmaceuticals. I knew it had an effect on me that would relax me, help me get to sleep, and feel better about things. And when I used it to treat my PTSD symptoms for the first time, it was very, very effective. And it was something that I could continue to use on a habitual, go-forward basis. And it seemed to put me in the right mindset. I noticed that when I used cannabis, I had more patience with my wife. I was able to endure some things longer. It would help me get out of the house. It would help me get into crowd. That's what I really struggled with initially. initially was crowded spaces, malls, shopping centers, festivals, fairs, all those fun things that you used to do. As soon as you're in those crowds, it would really start to wear on me. So I found I could use cannabis to get out into those places.
Cannabis allows them to be themselves without that constant state of fear and worry. And we know that there are cannabinoid receptors in the parts of the brain, what we call the amygdala or the hippocampus. These are very specific areas in the brain where fear is generated. And so if we can relax that area of the brain, we can treat the symptoms of constant worry and fear. What patients and vets in particular, what they love about cannabis is that it can replicate 3, 4, 5 medications sometimes. So they can come in and be on 10 to 11 drugs, have a lot of side effects, not feel themselves, and we can hopefully, with time, if cannabis is effective for them, reduce their pharmaceuticals by 30, 40, 50% or more. If you look at some of the research coming out, the research is starting to validate this, and so Health Canada, StatsCan had some statistics on vets using cannabis, and what we're seeing is that 2 out of 3 will say their symptoms of depression or suicidal ideation just diminish. And so that's remarkable because not a lot of therapies can be that effective. And so if this bears out in additional studies and trials, I think we're going to have a new gold standard when it comes to treating post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's going to be cannabis.
I would say you owe it to yourself to try cannabis because it's potentially a way better alternative. And if you don't like it, what have you lost? It's safe, it's not addictive, you can't hurt yourself. I mean, you really have nothing ultimately to lose. And if you're suffering so greatly that you're taking pharmaceuticals to treat these symptoms, you owe it to yourself.